this special exercise we are going to paint an object using only two colors, with the ultramarine blue and titanium white. And the goal with this exercise is to understand that to create some volume and create something realistic, it's not the details, it's the work on the values and the fact that your color is light or dark. And with these two colors, only these two colors, that's what we can really focus on to create some volume. So I have picked these two colors, but you can do this exercise also with some black and white or burnt umber and white also. The importance is to have a great contrast with these two colors to be able to create a wide range of values. So before painting, you can realize the drawing using the grid technique or even use a projector if you want to. And you can download the reference model with the link in the description. So get your brush and let's get started. So let's go and let's start by mixing our colors. So this ultramarine blue and this white, titanium white. The goal is really to create a value scale, meaning to have a wide range of blues that will get lighter and lighter as we get closer to white. This way we will have a broad selection to paint the areas with elements that are more or less dark. So at first I started with colors that had a large proportion of ultramarine blue. And as we go along, my proportion of ultramarine blue will gradually fade away, and I will end up with more and more white to get elements that are extremely light. So this is really going to be a very interesting exercise to help see the different subtleties in terms of value, because values are truly what allows us to create volume, applying the right colors and the right values to create volume. So here we have a wide range of blues, and we can now start painting this megaphone, a rather unusual subject, but which in my opinion is an excellent and very interesting exercise for practicing this. So let's get started, and we'll begin with painting the megaphone. What I notice is that the upper part is extremely dark, so here we can definitely go with pure ultramarine blue. I think that's the right value. Then as we move down it gets a little lighter, so I adjust and pick a slightly lighter value of ultramarine blue like I am doing here. This seems to be like the right shade of blue to paint this larger area below, where our megaphone starts to curve down. We will be able to use some very dark ultramarine blue on the sides as well. Right here you can see that it is really dark. So I have chosen to do this exercise with ultramarine blue and white for this exercise. We could have done it with other colors like burnt umber and white, for example, or permanent red and white, or yellow and white. The problem is, if I had used something other than ultramarine blue or burnt umber, for example lemon yellow, which is one of the other 5 colors in my palette, the lemon yellow would have been my darkest value, and in the end lemon yellow is not that dark, so we wouldn't have been able to get strong contrast or create a wide value range. Whereas with this ultramarine blue we have a color, the ultramarine blue, that is extremely dark, and white, which is extremely light, the lightest color we can have, and this way we can create a broad value scale with many different values. That's why this seems like a good choice to me. Now moving along this area, I found that the transition between colors right here, I had applied this color, but I feel like the shift between these two colors is too abrupt. The difference in value is too noticeable, so I am adjusting it to get a more intermediate color between the two, and I can apply my color here. Then once again we have a lighter area, so this time this color, this blue here, seems right to me, and it looks like we've got the right value, so I can apply it in this whole area. I continue with this lower part where there is a lighter area, so I adjust my color to get something lighter, and then we move back to something a little darker. So here the goal with this exercise is not to create the most realistic object possible. I am not aiming to create details or to blend between my different areas. It's really about focusing on the value of the objects and asking myself each time whether this part is darker or lighter than the one next to it. Not focusing on the color but only on the darkness or brightness of an element. So here we go, and I move over to this right side of the megaphone, and to create the volume we can see that the area is lighter, so I adjust my color to get something lighter in turn. Each time I try to compare the elements to set them in perspective with one another, to ask myself if I need something lighter or darker in this area, and this is how I manage to determine whether it is the right value or not for my area. Here too I have something fairly light so that it contrasts quite strongly with this dark band I had applied, and that helps to create volume. On the other side as well, to give that curved effect on either side of the megaphone, we again have something slightly lighter areas. We have some lighter areas that I can add here. So there we go for this area, it is fully painted. I sped things up a bit because it is essentially the same process. And we can move on to the one below. Here we are moving to another part of the megaphone, and to create a bit of volume in this area we can notice that there is a significant shift in value, which contrasts strongly with the dark blue we had applied above, and this is how we will create that sense of volume in this spot. And over this lighter area that I had painted, I can add some even lighter touches, these highlights, these very bright areas, which will also help me to create even more volume. So here I am adding these very bright touches, and we can also notice that there are some slightly darker touches than the base that I had applied, so I can go ahead and add those as well. So I am continuing with the lower area of the megaphone, and as you can see I started with the bottom of the handle, which is extremely dark, so I was able to go in with pure ultramarine blue. And actually what is nice about starting with this dark element, this darkest, is that it will then serve as a reference point to compare the other values. That is to say, now I know this is my darkest element, and then when I paint the other blue areas like this one, I can ask myself, compared to this darkest element, is it much lighter or just a bit lighter? And by asking myself this question, it makes things easier for me and helps me figure out whether I've got the right value or not. And this, comparing the values of elements with each other, is something we do a lot when painting, because in the end, a painting is a set of colors placed in relation to each other, dark elements next to lighter one, and asking ourselves whether the elements are light enough compared to the others help us apply the right value. What I can also do is look at the value of the other areas of my megaphone. For example, when I started with my darkest element, after that I applied a rather dark blue next to it, and I asked myself, this blue, compared to the other blues I applied in the upper part of the megaphone, how is it? Is it darker, lighter, or about the same? And I found out that this blue around the handle, this dark blue, was quite close to the dark blue I had applied on the upper part of the megaphone. So comparing the elements with one another is going to be very important. And here we are making progress in this area. It is a zone with a lot of different values, since we have many little ridges and texture in the handle, so we need to pay close attention to these small value changes, these little highlights, which help us successfully create a sense of volume in this zone. I have to admit I am struggling a little because my drawing wasn't precise enough, which shows how important it is to have a good drawing when you want to create a good painting. I have to admit I didn't take the necessary time to do it properly, since this exercise wasn't really focused on creating the most realistic object possible, so I am having a bit of trouble, I have to admit, but I am doing my best to try to create volume in this area. And so this really highlights the importance of having a quality drawing before creating a realistic artwork. In this case, it's not a disaster, but it's a good reminder that's very useful. So now I'm going back to something nice and light, since we are moving into another area, and to create a certain sense in volume in relation to the surrounding elements, there needs to be that difference in value. Here we have this whole part that is fairly light, and I think it looks like kind of a nose. We are trying to create that too. It's true that I have an imagination that can seem a bit overactive, but tell me if you think that this looks like a nose a little bit as well. So we are painting this area. I didn't draw the screw either, since it is a bit of a superfluous detail, not very important for this exercise. The goal isn't to create something ultra realistic, as I said. So let's continue with this area, and we will need to pay close attention to the small dark element in this area, because it creates a sort of a hollow. So once again, we'll try to apply the right values to create that effect ourselves. For this area, we can see that there is this little dark line, and it's really a series of small touches, some lighter, some darker, placed right next to each other, which helps to create texture and depth. So this should be pretty good. Then for the adjacent area, I'm going to skip this part of the video since it looks very similar to what we did earlier. So we'll meet again for the rest, and the upper part, the inside of the megaphone, as well as the flowers. If you are enjoying this video, there are dozens more like it waiting for you on my website. You will find complete real-time painting courses where I show every step by step. We explore all the major themes: portraits, the human bodies, landscapes, animals and their textures, and detailed still life. Each demonstration is explained from start to finish, so you can follow along easily and progress at your own pace. You will learn to master color mixing, play with light and bring more life to your paintings. So if you want to go further, click on the link in the description and discover all the painting courses. Otherwise, let's get back to this video. Let's start this new area with the inside of the megaphone. On the right side, just next to our leaves, we can see that there are some areas that are a little bit darker in comparison with the rest. There is some visible shadow, so I'm starting with that color. And we can also see that I added some slightly darker touches because this shadowed area isn't completely uniform. Then our elements become much lighter as we move towards the left and the far right edge of the megaphone. So here I have reloaded my palette with white and I am applying this very light color to the sides. I try to tap very lightly so that it barely touches the neighboring color to create a very slight blend, even though blending isn't the focus of this lesson. Here we are focusing on getting the right values. Then on the other side, the inside of the megaphone is really in the light, so once again I am applying this color. I also try to spread it out well to keep the elements rather smooth. So even though the goal isn't to focus on blending or other effects, we still try to apply the techniques we have seen since the beginning of the course. What we also notice is that on the far left edge there is a slightly darker element, which will also really help to give volume to the hollow space to the inside of the megaphone. And now I'm going to add some even darker elements. These darker elements can be added to the edges and I can go ahead and add them here. And there will also be some on the other side. And these darker elements creates a kind of little relief, and this relief is really very important to show that there is a hollow space and that it is deep inside the megaphone. And now I am going to paint this circular band that adds even more volume all around my megaphone. So I will start with something very light, and as I go along I will slightly adjust the value of what I am applying, since it won't necessarily be the same all the way around. So make sure to pay a close attention to that as well when you paint it. Now we are going to move on to the painting of the different leaves, and on the ones at the bottom left, the leaves are quite light, and when I look at them I ask myself, are they much darker than some parts of the megaphone? The inside of the megaphone, and actually not really. The color is obviously different, of course, in my photo, but when I look at the overall values of these light leaves, I realize it is about as dark as those shadows inside the megaphone. On the other hand, for this one, it's a completely different story. We can see that it is quite dark, so I am applying a rather dark blue at first that stands out well. But for this leaf, the values won't be the same all over, and to create the fold, I paint this element that's just next to it, and I use it a lighter blue value that contrasts with this dark blue I have added. And so there we go, and I will continue like this with each of the leaves, asking myself each time, does this element seem darker than the first leaf I painted? Or I can also compare it to the megaphone itself. And here, for example, with this new leaf I am painting, in its darkest areas, I notice that it is almost as dark as the very dark purples we had in some parts of the megaphone. So I can go with that as well. So each time I compare the value of this element and ask myself, when I look at this one, is it much darker than the other elements I painted so far? And that's what helps me move forward and paint these leaves with the right values. For the painting of the stems, we can see that they are fairly dark, but I don't want them too dark, because I want the roses I will paint afterward to really stand out. And if I make the stems too dark, on the one hand I won't have the right value, and on the other hand the contrast with the flowers won't be strong enough. So for the flowers, on this front-facing side, we can see that it is extremely dark, but the value isn't going to be the same everywhere. We can notice that around the edges there are very dark areas that I can mark with ultramarine blue that is pure, but between these areas that I mark in pure ultramarine blue, I will go with slightly lighter values. And that's also the goal of this exercise, to capture all these little value shifts that can be quite subtle, because even though we are in a dark area here, it won't have the same darkness all the way through. So we have to pay attention to these small changes, because they are what create the depth. And even within this very dark area, I have a few small highlights that really pop, some little touches that are just a bit lighter and that I can mark as well. On the upper part though, while there will be a few lines like this one that are fairly dark, afterward I am mostly going to apply lighter elements, as you can see right now. Just a few more brush strokes that we'll add together to finish the flower, and then I will skip the rest of this section on the leaves and the stem, as well as the other flowers that I hadn't drawn, because overall it's the same as what we have done here. So we'll now meet up for the painting of the background, which we'll do together. However, I encourage you to go ahead and complete the painting of those other flowers, stems and leaves to get a result that looks clean, and of course and especially to practice this whole part about working with bichromie and this value exercise. Let's now move on to painting the background, and before anything else we can start with the shadow cast by the megaphone on the ground. We can see that it is a dark area, but be careful because you will notice that as we get closer to the far left it becomes just a little lighter, as it does on the far right as well. Once again, a subtle change in value to watch out for. Now we are going to paint the entire background. I'm going to do this with a flat brush to get a fairly smooth background where the brush strokes won't be too visible and to cover larger areas. Here too in the background it's important to pay attention because we won't have the same values everywhere. We can see that there are purples of varying brightness depending on the areas, and the background is an element that shouldn't be overlooked, because if I make a completely uniform background without changing my values and without paying attention to them, I will end up with an object that might look flat, flattened out, and I won't manage to give it the proper sense of volume that I want. So be sure to pay attention to that, and especially on this left hand side next to the megaphone we can see there is an area that is extremely light and that I have just painted. Also, there is a light area along the bottom just under the megaphone where we have a whole slightly light band, a bit less bright than what we just applied though, but still fairly light. So I continue and I notice that on the right side we also have a slightly dark shadow from the megaphone, so I add that in and I adjust my color each time by remixing my white and ultramarine blue to get the right value in my blue. What we also notice on this right side is that we'll have all along the megaphone a slightly lighter band and then the shadows, so there's a very slight difference in value, but it's important to remember to apply that as well. And there we go, that's roughly how to go about the background, so make sure to apply the right values in the right place to complete this work in the best way possible. So that concludes this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful. And if you'd like to take your skills even further, I truly encourage you to join us on the website mentioned in the description. You will get access to all the drawing and painting courses to help you make real progress in your artwork. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon in a new video.